Hi, this is Paul Sanneman with Business Success Tips, and I teach contractors how to make more money in less time and definitely have more fun, which is the most important part. I'm excited about my guest today, Josh. Josh Kelly is with Grow with Clover, and he has a really unusual background for business coach. I mean, he said there was such a demand for his coaching services, he like fell into it, and that's unusual. Most people have to die for clients, right? I always say the only difference between a coach and somebody who's not a coach is somebody who's got a client, right? So
Yeah.
okay. So tell me your background, Josh, and about Grow with Clover and how it actually happened.
Yeah. So I'm a contractor myself. I own, HVAC plumbing, residential, electrical as well, residential business across the United States. Most people know me from Parker and Sons. That's my family's business. The largest, most successful contractor in the United States. Last year, just in Phoenix alone, we did $230 million. It is significantly more than that this year, but that's kind of every year kind of thing. And yeah, I'm a contractor, and really how I got into coaching. I mean, Paul said himself after we sold to the wrench group, and I stepped out of the day of Parker and says I had a couple opportunities come up and took them, and still tend to take opportunities when they come up. But I just started had old buddies and friends and people in the industry just because of the story we had and success and the scalability and how I've helped not only Parker and Sons, but over a dozen companies get over 100 million at this point, and hundreds break the 8-figure barrier. Just started knocking on my door and pestering me until I kind of gave in and launched Clover as a real business and really
So how'd
start.
you come up with the name Grow with Clover? I'm just curious.
Huh?
How'd you come up with the name of the company? It sounds like fun.
Honestly, this is not a good story. Everyone, like my wife's Irish, so they're like, "Oh, you did it for your wife, right?" It's like, no, I wish that were true. Honestly, so long story short, when Wrench bought Parker and Sons, we had a internal marketing business, right, where we were really just funneling cash. It was a tax advantage, so we could get an agency fee on our own stuff. And I
Right.
was helping a few other businesses, but maybe doing $20 million in billing, nothing like crazy for an agency, right? And that was called DMG, Diversified Marketing Group. We made it up on the fly. It was a terrible name. I hated the name. And when they bought Wrench bought Parker and Sons, they go, "Hey, they want DMG as part of the deal." I go, "Okay, like sure, but not the clients. Like you're just buying the name. All we want is the name, the whole thing, right?" So me and my father went out for
You bought
drinks.
the crappy name. It's funny.
Yeah. And me and my father went out for drinks, and we're like, "Let's just come up with a name on the fly. We're not gonna do anything with this anyway, right?" And we just called it Clover, and and I've just been sitting on it, and it's been doing, for most people, I would say, a lot of business over the years, right? But it wasn't like an active business. It was entirely passive, and made some money every single year, but it wasn't a focus of mine until probably 3 years ago. So there's not a great story. We picked it randomly in
Well,
about
that's
20
what a
minutes
good
at the bar.
story. So now let me tell you, the people listening to this podcast, when you say 100 million, are going to be incredibly intimidated. I mean, most of the guys that I work with
Yeah.
in construction recruiting are between a million and maybe 15, 20 million. I got a couple at 60, 70 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what can you tell a small contractor who's doing 2 million or 3 million, since you're used to doing these huge numbers? I mean, what do they have in common?
Everything. Like a lot of people think like a $2 million business has a totally different problem than a 50 or 100 or a $200 million business. That's not exactly true. We all have the same problems. Now, how you attack them and the resources you have and things do change. But like, to be clear, Parker and Sons, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a small business by any means, but when my family bought it, it was 6.5 million. So we went from 6.5 million to 230 million. There was no buying in that. We didn't consolidate. We didn't purchase other business. That was all organic growth.
Okay.
So
So
I've
how do you go
helped
from six and
hundreds
a
of
half million to
companies do that.
130 million? That
So
sounds
230, 230. Yeah.
okay. I'm shocked. How do you pull that off? That's amazing. How
Oh,
long
I've
did it
done
take
it.
you?
I've done it over a dozen times now, bud. Like there's a system to it. There's a process. And it's not a one size fits all. I don't believe in one size fits all, but I mean, here's what I would tell you. If you're a 2 million or $5 million business, you're there are some gaps that change, right? And the biggest gaps, I would say the hardest gap you get out of is getting out of the truck and doing the work yourself, right? And that's that $1 to $2 million business. And that's just a mental gap, right? There's nothing physically different about that business. It's just that owners realize that he's an owner and not a artist or a technician or whatever you want to call it, right?
Right.
That's the biggest gap and probably the hardest. After that, it's that $8 to $10 million range where I got put in middle management, right? That's a big mental gap because you're now trusting other people essentially run your business, and you have to have accountability, and not everything's falling.
I tell you, I agree
right?
with you, Josh, because having worked with contractors for 40 years, I
Yeah.
try to build businesses. The biggest problem is trust
Yeah, for
because
sure.
they've had
Well,
total
trust but
control of
verify. You know what I
everything.
mean? Like, you don't have to trust if you do it right. You have to trust somewhat, but trust but verify. Create accountability, create systems, create processes.
Well, that's
And
easy to say, but it's hard to do. So give me some specific. I got this $2 million business, right? I'm a contractor.
yeah,
And people say, I mean, I think you should always be recruiting, but I failed miserably at convincing people to do that because they go, oh, it's an expense. The employees are expense. And the classic model is, well, I'm not big enough to afford management. I'm not big enough to afford recruiting. It's like, I got to get bigger before I can actually, justify the stuff because I'm barely making maybe I'm doing 2 million, making 150,000 a year. So how do I justify middle management?
so I mean, number one, those are terrible margins. You got to fix your margins. So if you're making $150,000 a year off of 2 million, you have some structural issues. And I mean, we could go into all kinds of details, and I'm happy to do that, but it really depends on the business, right? For the most part, like if you don't feel like you have the money for recruiting, and by the way, a $2 million business doesn't have middle management. It's not necessary. It's not beneficial. You can't afford to get the kind of people that you would want, right? But certainly you can afford to recruit. There's no doubt in the world. You just got to build it into your pricing model, right? Most small businesses, number one, never know how to set pricing. And they've heard that 1,000 times, but they don't have the system, the Excel sheets, and the process, and the step-by-step A to Z and how to properly set pricing. So ideas are cheap. Implementation is all that matters. You got to get with somebody who's done this before and get the help on that, right? But you include it in your pricing, and most small businesses are terrible at pricing, but they're terrible at upselling and cross-selling and
Well,
making
I
the
mean,
most
if you
out of the
look at
customers they
most
have.
businesses, they don't have a marketing budget or a recruiting budget, right? Those are like not in their budgets.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I mean, they certainly spend money on it, but it's not purposeful, right?
it's not like they don't have an annual budget. Say we're going to
Yeah.
spend 50,000 on marketing, and this is what we're going to do it on.
Yeah. And you
Sometimes
throw it against the wall
they
and see
fall
what
victim
sticks.
to the
And
best
yeah.
salesman that shows up at the door. Sometimes, whether
Yep.
it's it used to be radio, now it's the social media, and I'll get you all over Facebook, and I'll get you famous on LinkedIn, blah blah blah. So why don't you give me $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and I'll do it for you.
Yeah. No, you got to be careful who you hire. And no matter who you hire, you have to, trust but verify. You've got to create tracking and accountability and follow through. And if you don't do that, then it doesn't matter who you hire. They won't do a good job. And that's not a knock on anyone. It's just like a distributor or a parts house, a material supplier. Like when they first get you, they will come out of their shoes to get your business, right? But once they get used to having you in there, they start playing the how little game. How low can I do and keep your business instead of the how much game? How much can I do to make sure I get your business? So you just have to always balance that no matter who you're using, right? And what I would say is, like,
I mean, I've worked with lots of businesses, and
yeah,
you have two problems. Either they can't find enough clients or they can't find enough people, right? But typically it's sales. They can't find enough clients. They go, how am I going to compete with the big HVAC company down the street, or, plumbing company for a remodeling contract? How do I get bigger? And they just don't know how to expand. Obviously you have the secret, so let's hear it.
well, I mean, at different stages, you're going to do different things. But the truth is, a lot of contractors tend to be like, what is my competition doing? Well, that must be working. Why don't I try that? And like, number one, this, I know this. Just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean they're tracking it. Even big successful companies, sometimes I'll go in and it's kind of embarrassing. Like they're spending all this money, they have no idea whether it's working or not. So number one, don't assume other people are doing it right. Just number two, if something, like, go where other people's aren't. Like specifically, if you have a small business, like, and you're in Phoenix, you better not be doing SEO, right? Because there's only 3 winners, right? And if you're in Tucson or in Flagstaff or in Tuscaloosa, like, you have opportunity there. In Phoenix, there's huge players that are gonna blow you out of the water, not a thing. Can't afford to do radio, can't afford to do billboards. It's not real things. But what you can do is own neighborhoods, right? Buy trucks. And
Tell me more about how do I own a neighborhood?
I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, but at the very basic level, right? Let's say I have this neighborhood that's a prime target for me. It's an 8 to 10 years ago, which I know means they're going to be replacing water heaters. They're going to be replacing AC units soon. It's an opportunity for me, right? And it's before everyone else hops in, right? So I could do direct mail to this area, right? I could buy a list. I could email. I could text message. I could put yard signs up in the area. I could do a geofence that specific neighborhood, and I could hit them with social media ads and YouTube ads and remarketing ads. I could do door-to-door knocking. I could do telemarketing. And like, instead of, hey, I'm going to try to be all of Phoenix, I'm going to get involved with this HOA. I'm going to get involved with the restaurants and the gas station that's right outside this neighborhood. And I'm going to earn a large percentage of this neighborhood. And once I get that percentage and I feel good about it, then I move on to the next neighborhood, but not until. So you have to be a big fish in a small pond. Never be the small fish in the big pond.
So you have to sort of come up with your own pond, right?
Sometimes you got to make your own pond. Yeah, for sure. And that's hard to do sometimes, but it just takes a little more creative. When you're small, the truth is every dollar has to turn into $15 to $20, right? That's what your goal is that you spend out, right? If you're less advanced, maybe it's 1 out of 10, but it shouldn't be, especially at that size. So you have to be willing to do things that others aren't. You have to be more creative. You have to get more advice than a big company that could take more risks than you can, right? When you got $1 million marketing budget or a $10 or $20 million marketing budget, if 3% or 5% don't work that well, I'm still keeping everybody busy.
Right.
At $2 million and you got a $150,000 marketing budget, every single dollar needs to.
Well, I'm sure you've heard this in marketing. I've heard like, well, you're going to spend 100, I don't know, pick a number, 20,000 in marketing. We know half of it's a waste. We don't know which half. I'm sure you've heard that before, right?
Well, I mean, that was true a long time ago. That's not true anymore. Most things overwhelming, especially as a small business, you could track and you could directly track, even if you're tracking just by zip codes or neighborhoods that you're targeting, and certainly tracking numbers and all that fun stuff. Like, there's systems to this. And like, that's the big difference. Like, businesses are larger than they've ever been because the scalability, the technology, the systems have improved. And just because you're a $2 million business doesn't mean you should be built to run like a $2 million business. If you want to be a $10 million business, there's things you can't afford to do right now. But the very basic
some examples
stuff,
of
like
things that I can't afford to do and can't afford to do in the way of a small business. I pick a number. I'm a remodeling contractor. I'm doing 3 million. I mean, my key was always meet with architects because you can do that and meet the architects. When it comes to media, I go, I'm lost, man. I don't know where to spend the money and how to spend it. I think, the geofencing thing is a cool idea. In fact,
it's super simple. It's super simple. And like, you got to remember, as a small business, like, you could play the woe's me game. And like, there are disadvantages you have being a small businesses, but there are also huge advantages. Like
tell me some of those huge advantages. Make my clients feel better.
A Parker and Sons is never going to do the guerrilla hand-to-hand combat. They're never going to attack neighborhoods. It's not scalable enough for them. Getting an extra 10 calls a day isn't a big deal. If you're a remodeling company, like 10 calls
a week would be awesome,
gigantic
right?
deal.
Yeah.
Like, you've tripled your business for most remodeling companies, right? If you get 10 calls a week potentially, right? So you could play a different scale and really trying to own something and do the heavy lifting instead of letting the money work for you. Big companies let the money work for you, and because of that, they leave a bunch of meat on the bone. Because it has
give me some examples of what the heavy lifting for a remodeling contractor in Phoenix would look like, because you live in Phoenix.
Yeah, it's the hand-to-hand combat. It's the actively reaching out to customers consistently, asking for referrals. Like, a big company will do that, but we'll do it through automated texts and automatic emails. We're not going to make 3 phone calls and then follow up and go back to that house, knock on the door, and knock on the door next to it, and the 3 with pictures of the customer that you just did. Say, I was just at John's house. Here's the before and after. If you ever want to update your kitchen, I'd love to have a conversation with you too. Big companies aren't going to do that. It's just not a big enough priority for them. You, as a small contractor, have huge advantages on the heavy lifting stuff, because that if you get one of those a day to say yes just to a consultation, that's a big deal. Right. Parker and Sons, that would be a drop in the bucket. It's not even worth the effort, because how do I get 500 trucks to do that? It's pretty hard. How do I get 3 guys to do it? I can explain that story pretty well. I can't explain that story one-on-one 500 times.
So you've worked with a lot of businesses. What would you say if you're going to say what are the three things, just pick three, that make the biggest difference in taking, the small guy who's a couple million to 10 million?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a loaded question. It all depends on the business, right? Because certain businesses naturally.
I'm going to say a residential
leadership.
contractor, an HVAC, somebody who's in construction,
Yeah.
a
So,
remodeler, somebody like that.
so the number one issue, and we already talked about it, is really they don't make enough money off the customers they're already getting. They focus on marketing instead of capitalizing on the phone calls they have. So it's just conversion and upselling and cross-selling in the house. That's your biggest opportunity, and over the phone. But that's your biggest opportunity by far, making the most out of the customers you already have. The second biggest mistake I would say is most small contractors aren't really trackers, right? They think marketing is an art, not a science. It is math. It is nothing more, nothing less. But not just marketing, it's your conversion, your systems, your processes, your sales processes. You need to A/B test and treat your business like a science experiment. And in order to do that effectively, you need data. And data is not a benefit that only big companies have. Every company has access to that data, and
But
you
give
need
me an
solid.
example of data that a contractor would need that he doesn't know he needs or wouldn't use.
I mean, some people just look, I mean, the average small contractor doesn't even have a P&L, man. I mean, they may have one, but they judge their business success on their bank account, right? They don't run a daily progress report. So they don't set goals for the month by department. They don't set daily revenue goals. They don't set call volume goals. They don't set conversion goals. They don't set upselling goals. They don't track warranty rates. They don't track recruiting rates or recruiting expense or recruiting costs or marketing cost per acquisition or ROI. They don't do any of that shit.
That is
So
true.
there's a lot to behind that. And that sounds really complicated.
It
But
does.
if you're just given a spreadsheet and say, like, here's your CRM, here's exactly how to pull it, fill this out, it does everything for you. Not that complicated. And you have to teach them how to read a P&L and really understand it and why it's important. But I mean, all this stuff is like, I could teach a third grader how to do this, right? If I could teach
Here's a
third
quote. I've
grader,
been
I
a
could
coach
teach
for many
you.
years. Knowing what to do and doing what you know are two entirely separate things, right?
That's correct.
So for many times I'd say, go visit architects or what's your P&L. I mean, I would use the example sometimes. I go, Costco literally knows how many people are in the store at any one time, and they change their labor every 3 or 4 hours to match the labor cost. Even Taco Bell literally does, labor costs. That's when they control. They do it every 4 hours with the cash register, figure out who's in and out to control their labor cost. Mama Mia's Pizza across the street has no clue till the end of the year, right?
Correct.
So how does a contractor get that information and make it work?
I mean, so it depends what kind of field management or CRM or what they're using. Most are going to use software to fill most of this, but most of them don't even fill out or use the software properly. The thing is, like, you could get real sophisticated with this, and this sounds real sophisticated, but I'm telling you right now, tracking a cost per acquisition for marketing, or actually knowing your financial or your cost of goods sold, like, these are not complicated things to do. People just freeze up and don't do it because there's a fear of not knowing. So they don't research, they don't seek out experts like myself or yourself. They don't go through that process, and because of that, they stay in the dark. Right? Like, you don't have to get sophisticated with this stuff. The difference between a big company and a small company is not because we have this totally different way of doing things or this unbelievable. It's we consistently do the basics. It's the consistency and the without fail on the very basics is what drives most really large successful businesses. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. All you need is a playbook, right? A to Z. Don't just, here's the idea, right? I used to go to conferences all the time, and I speak at conferences, and I've been at conferences this week, right? And you get this amazing speaker up there, and it just blows your mind. And I go up to a little hotel room and that little desk with my pad of paper, and then I'm blank because he taught me the idea, but not the execution, right?
Right.
You always need to, whoever you take advice from, make sure they're also giving you the execution, the A to Z playbook.
Give me an
Playbooks are the
example.
secret. Huh?
Give me an example of where you didn't get the execution and it didn't work. I mean, like a speaker.
I got like how much time do we have on this podcast, man?
Yeah, I'll go for one because this is really good information for me because I've been dragging contractors through technology for 40 years. I mean, I was before cell phones. I'm a really old guy, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
then
yeah. I
I
remember the
drug them
pager
through cell
days.
phones and what's the last cell phones. Then I went to websites and went to email. From email, then we finally ended up with project management software like Build It, Trend, and Co-Construct. And now it's AI, right? But it's always kicking and screaming like, it works good for me. I remember the yellow pad. There's still some project managers that show up with a damn yellow pad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's you don't know what you don't know. You don't know how much that idea is costing you or opportunity you're losing. That's why the tracking is so important, right? Like it's really like and the scalable system. Like I'll be perfectly blunt about this, and this is my opinion. You may totally disagree with this, right? But if I'm gonna sell an air conditioning unit as an example or remodel or wherever, it is far better experience for me to handwrite absolutely everything that I'm going to do, step by step, the whole process, do it right in front of them. It's a better experience, but it's not scalable. Because if I'm doing that as the owner, that's one thing. How do I get my salespeople to do that? How do I get all the way down the line? It's not real. I have to create the systems where it happens without fail, without me needing to check and without me trying to drive it. So most people that are late adapters to technology, it's really because they don't understand what they're losing and they don't understand the benefits to it. So, I mean, it's just like anything else. Anytime I launch something to a team member, you have to sell. You have to sell the idea always.
Well, it's like most contractors don't understand lost opportunity cost. It's like something they can't figure out. So I've worked with Builder, Trend, and Co-Construct and Procore and Job Trade and all those companies. Their biggest problem is getting the contractor to use the software the way it was designed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's never gonna happen. Like, let's just be honest about it, right? Like in our industry, my industry specifically, really with home service contractors. I don't play as much in the remodeling space, but it's like roofing, garage doors, electrical, plumbing. You get like Service Titan owns the industry more or less. If you're a larger business, your Service Titan, and the usage rate on Service Titan is under 5%, right? Like it has all its capabilities, but once again, you could go so far down the rabbit hole with amazing, cool stuff that sound absolutely amazing. But all you have to do is the basics well and consistently.
So the basics are, I'm assuming margin's a big one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Margins, setting your pricing right, cross-selling, upselling, tracking the results, driving the team, holding them accountable. Like none of this stuff is new ideas, I think, to anyone. It's just how do I do it every day without fail? And how do I build systems, processes, tools where it's not relying on me to make sure it happens, but it's like a guaranteed to a point that it happens.
So,
right?
so you're a coach. How do you get people to do it? How is it accountability? You look at their numbers. How do you actually get people to do what you ask them to do?
Oh yeah. I mean, so it's twofold. So number one, anytime we share any idea, we always give playbooks. Like step to step, here's not only how you do it, here's how you roll out to the team. Here's the results you could expect. Here's what you can expect in your bottom line by doing this, whether that's more sales or decreasing costs or whatever that specific thing's for, right? So you got to paint the picture and you got to sell it, right? Number two, once you tell me it's a good idea and you know you want to do it, and then it becomes an accountability issues. I've given you all the tools, absolutely everything you would need to implement it. Now it's just a choice. And if you told me that, yes, I love this idea, I'm going to do it, then I'm going to call, not me specifically, but one of our accountability managers. I will give you a call and say, listen, how do you go when we roll this? I know it's most of why sales process, our average company gets a 7% bump in conversion. What kind of bump did you get this week? And they say something to the fact of, wow, we didn't actually roll it out. He goes, did we not explain it properly? Did you not understand it? Was there an issue? What happened? And you got to hold their feet to the fire. Sometimes contractors need to boot up their butt. It just is what it is. I'm no different. So it's a combination of giving them what they actually need to make it successful and the accountability side. And yeah, of course, we go through their reporting and tracking and their financials, and we make sure we guarantee 35% growth. Guaranteed. In order to do that, we have to actually track it. Right. So, there's a lot to it. It's just like anything else. If I get a team member to do something, if I just tell them to do it, like I know that's not going to happen. I got to sell it to them. I got to get into that second meeting, that meeting out in the parking lot, and make sure they're bought in there, which is the real meeting, right? I got to make sure I'm following up and tracking and bring results. And when results aren't coming in, I'm sitting with them and adjusting and going through the process and making adjustments either with them or sometimes in the process, because my team's just a different animal, right? There's layers to this, and it sounds really complicated, but not when you have a checklist in front of you. Not when you have the A to Z playbook. Not, it's like, if this, then do this. You know what I mean? It's not that complicated. It just takes a lot of work, but we're at
I mean, a lot of contractors, don't know what they don't know, right? Obviously.
100%.
So you're in there, and I'm as a coach for 4 years, my biggest issue was getting people to do. I built a lot of business from $1 million to 50 million. I did it like, if they do what I told them to do, it always worked. I mean, it was like 100% of the time. I said, call on 5 architects a week, and within 2 years, you will get $5 to $10 million of work from those architects. Never had it fail, worked every time. He'd say, did you call architects a week? Well, my dog get the homework, my kid got sick, right? In fact, the worst answer I ever heard, Josh, was I said, you're supposed to call on architects, it works. I know that works, I'll get you work from architects. I said, why'd you stop doing it? He actually said, because it worked so well.
Yeah, I got a contractor by Brett out in Tucson. He calls it the figure 8 of death. It's like, oh, it's not working. Oh shit, we gotta spend time, energy. You fix it, gets right back to the top, and we stop doing it because it's no longer a problem. But it's no longer a problem because we're doing this thing,
right?
And then they stop doing the thing and they go right back. And here's the thing that screws most people up: most contractors get back to that bottom of that figure 8, right? And now it's a big problem again. They wait way too long to fix it. But now, instead of going back to the thing they know that works, they try to come up with a new idea. It's like, no, do the basics and just stick with it. Just keep doing it every single day, and it no longer is a problem.
Well, I use an example. How do you get in shape? Eat right and exercise. It's not a brain show. I mean, America's fat, right? So everybody knows the answer, but
but see, that's true, but it's also a cop out, right? Because there's an accountability piece to this, right? Like, so I work out every single day, right? I'm not any different than any other guy in the world. I don't want to work out. It's not difficult. Here's my solution. I built this is not for everybody, so don't take this the wrong way, right? But I built a gym right here at my house. My trainer shows up to my house at 6 a.m. My garage door opens. It's pretty hard not to roll out of bed, right? I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt, and I fought and all that fun stuff, right? I used to have a rule, like I could skip any class I wanted. Jiu-jitsu is pretty rough on your body sometimes. But the rule was I had to go and park in the parking lot, right? If I parked in the parking lot and decided to leave, no questions, I didn't want to give myself any issues with it, right? But most of the time you're there, you end up going.
So
that
Josh,
sounds like such a simple thing.
You know how I solved the problem, Josh?
I
married my trainer.
But that's an extreme approach, but that would work too.
It definitely worked.
Yeah. Well, my trainer's a dude with a mustache. So that's not
that wouldn't work out for you. I didn't have to blonde, so it was good. But I mean, I haven't got any choice, right? I have to eat right. It's just the way life is. So, well, what impresses me about you, Josh, is you seem like you have literally the answers. You've done this. You built big companies. A lot of contractors coaches have never done what you've done. Right.
Yeah. That's always like, it always bugs me, and I'm not calling anyone out, so please don't hear this and think whoever this is listening is you. Right. But like, and I got people who's, they have an $8 million business, and they're taking advice from people who sold their business 3.5 years ago. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Somebody's coming on the door. Sold their business 3.5 years ago. And at the peak, it was $3 million. It's like, how are you giving advice to this person? But yeah, it's complicated. The world is full of people who teach that can't do. And I mean, to me, it's a big deal too. Like, I'm a contractor now, right? Like, things change so fast and so much. Like, if you're not living in it day to day, you will slowly get behind.
I'm going to ask you a very controversial question here, right?
Yeah.
What do you think of AI? Is it going to make a difference or not? Change the planet, kill the planet? I'm always interested in people's opinion on that one.
I mean, of course it's going to change the planet. What are you talking about? I mean, who thinks it doesn't? Right. Now, are there going to be positive things about it? There are going to be unbelievably, amazingly positive things. Are there going to be negative things about it? There are going to be unbelievably negative things
Negative
about it too,
things.
just like every other new technology ever invented, right? But AI is incredible stuff, and at this point, it's in its infancy stages, and we don't know exactly what it's going to look like or how it's going to affect the world. We have some pretty good ideas. It's going to affect our industry pretty significantly, and a lot of people think like they talk about like cashiers at grocery stores how they got phased out, and they think like, well, plumbing will never do that. It's like, well, that's not exactly true, right? There's already systems for AC systems right now where you could essentially hook up your phone and diagnose the whole system, right? Or
Like you
like
plug a computer into your car,
smart
right?
AC, or like there's all kinds
Yeah.
of technology coming out like that.
So,
Um, that's going to change the whole industry, and like people are afraid of that, but the truth is, if you're aware of it and you're set up for it, this is a huge opportunity, not a risk, right?
well, that's what I
Um,
see. I see my experience is that contractors that embrace technology and actually implement what's out there always do way better than the ones that don't.
yeah. No,
But
I mean, I don't know if that's yeah, I mean, long term for sure. Long term for
I mean,
sure. There's
if
also
you,
early adapters, and a lot of times it's not even beneficial to be an early adapter.
well, but
Sometimes
I
it
mean,
is.
right now, if you don't have some kind of, CRM, some kind of, project management system, if you're not on
Yeah,
QuickBooks or
you're making your
something,
life hard.
I
You're
mean,
making your life
you
hard.
got to know
There's
how
no
much.
doubt.
My question is, if you don't know how much you're making every week, that's not a good idea. But most people don't. Did you lose or make money this week, and if so, why? Simple question, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. It is, and it's not. People try and make this big difficult thing, but it's just because they haven't been taught.
So,
They don't know.
what
They've
is
not
it?
asked for help.
A couple of questions. So, what about cost? I mean, one, what is your service cost? And secondly, how does it work? How do you get all these systems and playbooks into a small contractor? How do they afford it? I mean, these $1 million, $100 million companies. I'm going, I can't
Yeah,
afford
yeah.
this, right?
Yeah, no. So I mean, there's a scale with us. A lot of those like really large companies are working one-on-one with me directly, and we're doing one-on-one consulting. That's kind of a different animal, and that is like I have a limited bandwidth, and that is not inexpensive. Our average contractor, though, most are on our contractor catapult program, which is small group monthly coaching call with me, or I bring in sometimes other large $100 million contractors, an accountability group, an accountability manager, a systems weekly knowledge bombs, like just content, solutions to 99% of the problems you're going to run to. And just be clear about this. Like, I'm not the guy that you come to, like, how do I hire someone? Like, what forms do I send? And like, that's not what I do. It's like, oh, I need to hire the best people in my city. I'll teach you how to do that. Right. So like, there is a baseline below me. Like, if you don't know anything about business whatsoever, that would be a good baseline to have. But most contractors, it's $6,500 for the entire year,
Wow,
annualized, and that's where we guarantee 35%. That's it.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So the ROI on that is huge, right? I mean, how can you lose?
Oh, I mean, for most, it depends on your size, right? But it could be anywhere from 100 times to 500 times.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to hire you tomorrow. I'm ready. Holy
Yeah.
crap! This guy's got a lot of stuff. I've built several companies. I've built a couple of construction companies to 10 or 20 million, 30 million, but I've never done the 100 million thing, right? Ever.
Yeah.
But I have this, like a technique. You call these people, you do these things. I've got a formula like anybody else. If people do what I ask them to do, it always gets them 2 to 20 million. It's never missed. But getting them to do it's not easy. So I think this is awesome. I mean, I think anybody listening to this podcast who doesn't at least contact you is just crazy, because you have the answer. I mean, I've talked to a lot, trust me, on this podcast, a lot of coaches. This is what we do. But you're the first one I've come across that's actually done it, which is amazing. And actually have the systems in the playbook for some kind of reasonable price other than, $3,000 a month or something, to show contractors what they need to do. Again, it's like, a membership to the gym will not help you lose weight, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You actually have to show up and do the work. But
100%.
at least you've got the machines and the technology that if you do what you're supposed to do at the gym, you will get healthier every time.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Yeah. I mean, for me, like, and not to get too much detail, but like, we exited Parker and Sons, and I've exited a few other businesses over the years. I'm not in this position where I do this for money. I do this for legacy, and I want to be one of the biggest influencers and not like some of the guys that are on social media. That's just not my style. But I like being a silent giant, right? And really making a big difference in people's lives. And you can't do that and charge $100,000 a year. It's just not real, because then you can't help that many people.
Well,
You know what I mean?
there's I think about 1 million contractors out there, give or take, and something like that.
Yeah, I've heard. I don't know what the actual number is, but I've heard numbers like that. Yeah,
Right. And most of them are in survival.
well, overwhelming majority. Yeah,
Yeah,
or survival sometimes is a generous way of calling it. Yeah,
that's right. And the thing is, I mean, I have the answer for recruiting, you have the answer for, coaching. But again, people have to, buy into it and say, hey, it makes sense, right?
yeah.
So again, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate you coming. I mean, I'm incredibly impressed because I've talked to a lot of coaches and you're amazing. You don't look old
Thank you,
enough to
man.
do what you've done. I want to ask how old you are because
My birthday's next month, or in a couple months, I'll be 39.
you got a lot done by the time you were 39. Wow. You must have started really young.
Got a lot more to do, man.
Sounds cool. Okay. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Hey, if you listen to this podcast, if you don't give him a call, you're just stupid.
That's not true. But yeah, give me a call anyway.
I'm sorry. I
yeah.
couldn't help myself.
Yeah, give me a
Have a
call
good one.
anyway. But yeah. No, there's reasons. Yeah, honestly, some people don't want to grow, and I'm not in a position.
I'm not saying if you're in survival and you want to get out of survival, I think you have some really good answers for something people can afford. If you want to stay in survival, hey, go for it. That's your choice.
And as weird as it is, like, and this is not a knock, but I know contractors that do 2 or 3 million, and they clear $400,000 a year. It's a full-time job. It's constant. They never get a break. But you know what? There ain't nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a good living, and most Americans would die to have that job. And who's to say that they're not successful? I think that's incredibly successful. That's just not what I do. You know what I mean? If you want to scale it and actually have a business instead of a high-paying job, then give me a call.
Well, I always tell people the difference between a job and a business is if you go away and the money slows down, you own a job.
Yeah. It makes money while you sleep. That's the secret.
Okay. Thanks again, Josh. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.